means that unusually the religious was actually encouraged local families to be afraid of each other and to denounce each other's witches. It's pretty good idea. Adding
one every period you hear.
Once a person was accused of being a witch, it was necessary to provide concrete evidence before prosecution. But how do you prove that a spell or curse had been cast? What the authorities needed were other, more tangible signs of witchcraft. In 1486, a guidebook on finding witches called the Malleus Maleficarum, or the Hammer of the Witches, was published. It provided a definition of witchcraft as well as how to investigate, try, and judge cases. The book stated that one sure sign of a witch was the devil's mark or witch's tooth.
You gotta read it, man.
Looking for the devil's mark.
All the answers are in there. Each section is correlated.
It involved a careful inspection of the suspected witch's body, which could only be accomplished after choosing all of his or her.
So really based on the devil.
Oh, no.
Many spirits and the spirits of Satan. And the idea is that you find
They would then test that mark by piercing it with a needle or pin. If pain was felt, or if blood was drawn from the mark, there was no evidence there to indicate that this person might be ill. On the other hand, if after probing with a needle or pin and they find that there is no pain, and there is no blood, it is not normal, it is not natural, it is unnatural, then there is evidence in their view that this might in fact be a witch's mark.
Another popular method in the Middle Ages was called swimming a witch. The theory was that water being pure would reject all evil. The belief was that a witch would float and an innocent person would sink. The test always provided a victim. The Malleus Maleficarum also encouraged torture as a way to elicit a confession from a suspected witch.
the best way of obtaining confession is to apply force, less in purely brutal practical terms. The most effective actual method used was known as stropado. It's a bit like having your arm twisted behind your back in a school playground, except it goes on for hours. Now, the reason why this was used is that it's excruciatingly painful. It's horrible.
Torturing suspected witches was justified in the eyes of the law. English magistrates considered the practice of witchcraft a crime against the church and the state.
From the days of Henry VIII onward, the king is the head of the church. So your political leader is also the head of the Church of England. And for this reason, when you turn your back upon God and upon the church, you are very much also turning your back upon your king.
Witchcraft was therefore considered an act of treason and a capital offense. Witch hunts continued unabated through the 17th century. Neighbors accused neighbors. Thousands of innocent lives were lost. In 1629, King Charles I of England granted a religious splinter group called the Puritans a charter to settle and govern an English colony in the Massachusetts Bay. They desired to create a new perfect society based on the principles of the Bible, a theocracy with no separation of church and state.
Their goal was a kind of model community, what they called a city on a hill, that would be a kind of light to people all over the world. I mean, we still have that notion of the U.S. with us today, but it was very intense in those early years.
Not everyone who crossed over was a Puritan.
Others leave because they have no land, because they have no jobs, because their lives in England are so difficult that going to the edge of the known world and building a society out of nothing sounds better. One of the things that eventually produces a natural kind of tension in many New England communities and indeed in many colonial communities is you have people who are there for different reasons.
The Puritans remained British citizens, and like their countrymen, they were also a community that very much believed that witches existed.
You have to understand witchcraft, particularly in light of their larger belief system, that this was central to their beliefs. It wasn't an odd side thing, but it was something that they thought about regularly as they had to be worried about witches in their midst.
Satan was real. Satan and his forces were around us in an invisible world. And we're always watching. We're always looking for an opportunity to have an effect for evil upon the godly community, always attempting to break down a godly way of life and to discredit the godly community before the unbelieving world.
Little wonder that in this highly charged environment, the Puritans engaged in witch hunts, just as they had in England. But the first witch trial in Massachusetts was not in Salem. It was in Charlestown in 1648. A midwife and healer named Margaret Jones was accused of witchcraft. Villagers believed that she had a malignant touch that could cause deafness and nausea. Jones was supposed to be able to foretell the future and even had a witch's teeth. She was hanged in 1638. Other cases followed, but it would be 40 years before a witch trial would capture widespread public attention. In 1688, 4 Boston children were presumably possessed by Goodwife Glover, the mother of their family servant. Eventually, the children were cured through prayer and fasting, and Goodwife Glover, the witch, was executed. The investigator was Cotton Mather, a prominent Boston minister. He described in detail the behavior of the accused witch and the symptoms of the possessed children in his widely circulated book, Memorable Providences. The publication is believed to have had a profound effect on the people of Salem, and the unique circumstances surrounding Salem village in 1692 made it particularly vulnerable to a witch hunt of its own. About 500 people lived in Salem village, the outlying farming community of Salem Town, a thriving seaport. Although only 6 miles from the coast, it was considered a wilderness settlement.
It isn't a settled, a civilized, sophisticated community. It's a community that's on the outskirts, and they're just hanging on by their fingernails.
In addition to their everyday hardships, the Puritans lived in fear of the forest's dangers. The woods could easily conceal an Indian raid or the devil himself. The Puritans had other worries. The charter granting them independence from the crown and the right to own land was revoked in 1684. Although the charter was restored 5 years later when King James II was deposed, the political instability took its toll on Salem's residents. Further anxiety was apparent in everyday life because of their rigid religious practices.
I think for people in the 20th century, Puritan belief would be incredibly difficult religion because it's a religion of endless striving and very uncertain rewards.
The Puritans believed that every person's fate was predetermined before he or she was born. They searched for clues to reveal whether they were a member of the elect and could go to heaven, or be condemned to hell.
You're constantly searching yourself for signs that you can't read. Does the fact that I am sinning in this particular way mean that I am predestined for hell? Maybe. Does the fact that I am pious and doing all the things that the minister tells me in church mean that I've had an experience of indwelling grace and I'm one of God's chosen people? Maybe. How can we sense God's pleasure in this pleasure? That anxiety goes right to the core of Puritanism.
Also at the core of Puritanism was an inherent misogyny. Puritan women were expected to be silent, docile helpmates to their husbands, and mothers to their children.
Puritans had an ideal for women. And that ideal had a number of characteristics. I mean, a woman was expected to be submissive to the husband.
Him outside, she would in. Him in public, she at home. Him speaking, she listening. Him preaching, she hearing.
Puritans believed that just by her very nature, a woman was more likely than a man to enlist in the devil's service.
Women were not allowed to be ministers, so they were more likely to join the devil's cause and preach for his cause. There were two monks that presumed that women were naturally lustful, and that they were interested in, sexual relations with the devil, and that's why they joined the devil's forces. Other people argued that women were, they wanted certain kinds of knowledge, like eating from the garden. That they were constantly sought out things they weren't supposed to know about, and that led them to the devil.
The climate of suspicion that surrounded women was further exacerbated by the social dynamics of everyday life in Salem.
There's a kind of house atmosphere to these small communities, where you are what your neighbors say about you, and they're saying it back and forth in the same and over again over generations.
Bitter land disputes between Salem and Brooklyn. Villages also resented being under the political domain of Salem. The conservative village often fought with the more dominated, but had all the intention of ripping Salem's the witch hunt of 1692. Elsewhere in the world in 1692, in London, Aesop's Fables was published. German mathematician Gottfried von Leibniz invented a calculating machine which multiplied into numbers, and a major earthquake hit Jamaica, causing 2 tons of Port Royal, a pirate city, to fall into the sea along with fortunes of stolen goods. Similar intentions, bitter disputes, and religious fervor in Salem village proved a deadly combination, setting the stage for the witch hunt of 1692. Since then, historians, sociologists, and psychologists have sifted through letters, diaries, and testimonies to give meaning and perspective to one of the most traumatic events of colonial America.
There are over 500 surviving documents from the Salem Witchcraft House of 1692. They reflect about 160 cases, roughly, of witchcraft accusations during the year 1692. And they consist of warrants, indictments, a lot of depositions against various people, a few death warrants.
But surprisingly, there are no transcripts of the actual trials. Experts have pieced together the events leading up to the trial from other existing documents. It is believed that it all started in Salem Village, in the kitchen of the Reverend Samuel Harris.
When the winter of 1691-92 comes along, Reverend Harris and his wife are spending a good deal of their time, as any minister and his wife would have been doing, visiting the members of their parish.
Their daughter, Elizabeth Harris, aged 9, and her 11-year-old cousin, Abigail Williams, were left in the care of a Korean Indian slave named Tituba. Tituba warmed the cold moonlight nights by reminiscing about her childhood in Barbados. She told fanciful tales involving magic and power. As the winter wore on, Tituba grew older. He demonstrated voodoo tricks for the soldiers.
Tituba takes an inkwell and suspends it in a glass of water, and it goes up to a convent. And you will see there the image of your future husband.
Despite their young age, the girls knew this type of behavior was strictly forbidden. They managed to keep it a secret for a while.
Needless to say, with fascinating little stories like this, the group begins to grow. And it includes 6 other young girls in a very short time.
Ranging in age from 12 to 20, those listening to Tituba's stories included Anne Putnam Jr., Mary Braddock, Elizabeth Hubbard, Elizabeth Booth, Mercy Lewis, and Mary Warren. The lurid tale stirred excitement but also guilt in the young Puritans. They began to act in strange and aberrant ways.
They fell into these fits. They had certain kinds of trance experiences. They felt prickled with pins and cut with knives. They were tempted to throw themselves into the fire to commit suicide. They couldn't. They had to stop their ears when the minister preached the word of God. They couldn't listen to it.
They're screaming. They're crying out. They are throwing things about the room. This sort of behavior is not the behavior of young Christian girls. It's certainly not in a Puritan community.
Alarmed, the Reverend Harris called in the village physician, Dr. William Briggs, who found no physical symptoms to explain their unusual behavior and concluded that the cause must be spiritual. He declared the girls were under the evil hand of witchcraft. Given the Puritan belief in witches, the diagnosis was readily accepted.
Puritans believed that witches could, in fact, seduce or tempt people to become witches themselves. And so they saw this behavior, these convulsions and stuff, as a reaction against the witch. In other words, the idea was these young people were perceived as struggling not to become witches themselves.
Harris began to question the girls relentlessly to identify the witch or the female. Finally, Elizabeth and Abigail lived with them and had regaled them with their story.
With her status as a slave, she's an obvious choice to be accused of witchcraft. She's absolutely no one who's
But it did not end there. Next, the girls accused Sarah Good, the town beggar. Sarah Good's stooped and wrinkled appearance, her irascible temper, and her low status in the village made her easy.
All right, you guys enjoy your life.
And then another accusation.
You want me to wait for you?
No, you didn't.
Okay, bye. You go to your first.
everybody. Welcome to Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford. He is my trusted colleague, Wes Hodkowitz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field. And I'm sure you're all tuning in to listen to us talk about the Packers trades of Clinton Dix and Ty Montgomery. But you know what, Wes? I'm throwing you a curveball.
Oh, wow.
Because we haven't heard from GM Brian Gutekunst or head coach Mike McCarthy at the time we're taping this episode. We haven't gotten reaction from the locker room, which we will get after Wednesday's practice. So because I think the discussion of the trades will be better after we get all of that, I want to postpone that until tomorrow's show. So I want to focus today's show on this opponent for the Green Bay Packers, Sunday Night Football in Foxborough. It's the New England Patriots. And I tell you what, these two teams only face each other once every 4 years. Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers have faced each other only once. This is going to be a special game.
It really is. And Bill Belichick was asked about that matchup and in terms of the best quarterback games he's ever been a part of. He wasn't going to play the game of like ranking it or saying where it fits, but you can tell how much respect he has for Aaron Rodgers, how much respect he has for Mike McCarthy, and really respecting as a true historian of this game, given his father's ties to football as well, his appreciation for what this ultimately is and how rare it is. I made the analogy in Inbox this week. It really is an eclipse in the NFL of two of the greatest forces of this generation of football meeting, and they only cross paths. They only come into each other's orbit every 4 years, guaranteed. Right. So for this matchup to go out to Gillette Stadium, I don't know if you saw the Michael Jordan commercial.
All that was missing from that commercial was LeBron James. Yeah.
But even how James played it up too.
Yeah.
But yeah, they wear the same number. I think a lot of people consider them at this right now 1A, 1B in terms of the greatest quarterbacks of this current NFL. It's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah. Well, I think back to that game in 2014 at Lambeau Field, Wes. I know you were covering the team, beat reporter for the Press Gazette at that time. I personally felt that was one of the best regular season games I've ever seen.
It was the best I've ever seen.
At Lambeau Field.
Yeah, right.
When you think about, you had Darrelle Revis against Jordy Nelson. You had Nate Soldier against Clay Matthews. You had, obviously, Brady and Rodgers. Unfortunately, it should have been a preview of the Super Bowl that year. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. You had these two coaches, Mike McCarthy, Bill Belichick, with Super Bowls on their resume. And as we all expected, it was a four-quarter game, came right down to the last couple minutes. The Packers ended up pulling out a really, really big victory that showed the type of team they had that season. But here we are 4 years later, and the New England Patriots, about a month ago, we were hearing the usual thing we hear about the Patriots once they lose a game or two in September, that, Brady and Belichick, they're on the downside. It's not going to happen. The dynasty is finally over. Well, since that loss to the Detroit Lions, they actually lost 2 in a row. They lost the rematch of the AFC Championship to the Jacksonville Jaguars in Week 2. Then they lost on the road on Sunday Night Football at Ford Field to the Detroit Lions. They were 1-2. Well, all they've done is rip off 5 wins in a row. One of them a shootout 43-40 victory over the Kansas City Chiefs, who many are considering the best team in the AFC right now. The New England Patriots are 6-2, right in the middle of all of this, including a road win at Soldier Field over a Bears team that gave them all they could handle.
Yeah, and the scary thing is that Tom Brady's getting back into his groove again, it looks like. I mean,
sure is.
There were a couple turnovers early in the season, but for the most part, you look at these last 3 games he's played, and I know there weren't any touchdown passes against Buffalo, but they did what they needed to do to win that game in some adverse situations and circumstances. The fun thing about what I really appreciate about the Patriots is, I'd say over the last 10 years, there's probably 3, maybe 4 times where in September, the national media tries to pick up on that narrative. I remember there was a couple of years ago, was it maybe 3 or 4 years ago? They were talking about, is this it for Brady? Is he finally going down?
The attempts to bury this dynasty are starting to pile up here, because it's been attempted and no one's been successful.
But then at the end of the year, they're the AFC representative again,
right,
more times than not in the Super Bowl. It's a great matchup with the Packers for a number of reasons. You look at the weapons that they have. I know Bill Belichick told the New England media this week, he wants more depth at running back. Obviously, Cordarrelle Patterson ended up being their running back on Monday night. Sony Michel missing that game. James White giving them an option. But I really do like, to this point in the season, that 1-2 punch, considering they lost Jeremy Hill for the year, that Michel, and then with James White, we know what he's done for so long.
Yeah.
And then the weapons on the boundary. They went and got Josh Gordon. I know there were some issues there this week with him and potentially missing meetings reportedly, but there are a lot of things that the Packers have to take into account. But conversely, when you look at the Packers' weapons against this defense, there's potentially yards to be gained there too. So I think this just has a makings of what could be a really classic Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady shootout.
Yeah, I watched, the most I've watched the Patriots this year was when the Packers were on the bye week, and that was when the Patriots went to Soldier Field in Chicago to play the Bears. I watched a good portion of that game. And what I saw was a Patriots defense still kind of trying to find itself. They really had trouble with Mitch Trubisky.
Right.
They didn't account for his scrambling. Mitch Trubisky running the ball was really a key factor for the Bears in that game. And quite frankly, Wes, the Bears very well could have and maybe should have pulled that game out if not for 2 special teams touchdowns by the Patriots. Cordarrelle Patterson, he can still do it in the return game, can he? Man, is he dangerous. He took one to the house against Chicago that really started to turn that game around, and then they blocked a punt that they returned for a touchdown against the Bears. Chicago ends up losing that game by 7. A Hail Mary comes up 1 yard short of the goal line. And, that was potentially a second NFC North team that could have beaten the New England Patriots. But what I see is a defense that isn't quite up to the standard we've seen of Belichick defenses so far. And an offense that, frankly, with the injury to Sony Michel, they're trying to, figure some things out. They've had to deal with Rob Gronkowski missing some time and all that. So it's not the Patriots in the quote unquote sense of the word, but they're still the Patriots.
They are, and in the way that they're structured. I mean, you look at that game against Kansas City, which for my money, to this point now, 8 weeks into the season, is still the best game that was probably played this year. I watched basically in its entirety with Patrick Mahomes and the shootout that they found themselves in against Brady. But the thing that's interesting about Brady, a lot like with Aaron Rodgers, if you give him the ball with 1 minute, 2 minutes on the clock, and you're down 6, or you're tied, he's going to give you a chance to win that game. He just does. He's seen it. He's been a part of all of it. And the nice thing for them too is now we know the classic thing with Belichick and how he shuffles the roster, but there is the core. There's the nucleus. There's Rob Gronkowski, Julian Edelman, the guys that have been in the trenches with him for so long, their offensive line, knowing the way that Brady runs that offense and what they expect out of it. The biggest question for me is the defense, because although Matt Patricia did get the job with the Lions, and deservedly so, he was one of the hot coaching candidates after last season.
Yeah.
I mean, they did, I think, have the 29th ranked defense last year in the NFL. There were some things that they were working through. To me, they still don't have that Chandler Jones type difference maker as a pass rusher. I like the pieces that they have in the secondary, but I think they're a couple playmakers short right now, trying to find some guys that you can consistently rely on to generate pressure. So that's going to be the biggest adjustment. But to the original point that you made, they're still the Patriots, and it's still Tom Brady. You have to put up points, and you have to be aware that in the last final stretch of the game with Brady and Belichick and the way that they can play those situations, it's tough to counter sometimes.
Yeah, if there's a statistic that kind of jumps out at me that's hard to really figure out, it's what you mentioned about the pass rush, because the Patriots have played 8 games. Their defense has only 12 sacks in 8 games. That's not a lot. That's on pace for only 24 for an entire season, which is a pretty low number. The flip side of it is, though, they have a 40-plus-year-old quarterback who's only been sacked 11 times in 8 games, which tells you, obviously, Tom Brady wouldn't be playing into his 40s if he had been taking tons and tons of hits over the years. So he knows how to shift in the pocket. He's not a scrambler, but he knows how to maneuver in the pocket and get rid of the ball and protect himself and still make plays at the same time. It's interesting because so much is predicated in games these days, Wes, on pass rush and on disrupting quarterbacks and everything like that. You look at the statistics with the Patriots, and their games have been, about quarterbacks on both sides not necessarily being that disrupted. Right. So if the Packers can change that narrative a little bit, maybe that's where you find an edge.
I think it is, and it's just the thing that stands out to me, again, I don't want to paint this picture that the Patriots can't affect Rodgers and they can't do things to play winning football. Certainly they can. They wouldn't be at this point in the season if they couldn't.
Yeah.
But it's just that they don't have an Aaron Donald, the Ndamukong Suh type interior rusher. You don't really have
They don't have a Khalil Mack
power
edge.
outside rushers.
Right.
To me, the best embodiment of that was when Chandler Jones. Was there, and certainly they ended up trading him to Arizona, and he's gone on to have a really successful career there. But that's the one thing they lack. I mean, we got to remember that James Harrison started in the Super Bowl for them last year as an edge rusher. So I'm just really interested to see what this defense looks like when you put it up against Aaron Rodgers, because you wrote about it with One Last Look and some of these things that we've talked about, the ways you have to defend him, the things that teams do. Certainly Bill Belichick's going to be aware of that and how they need to, contain him. But at the same time, he always has that counter move to that as well. So that's the thing I'm excited about. Bill Belichick was effusive in his praise of McCarthy and Rodgers, and seeing that chess match play out, considering it's only the second time we're getting it due to his, I believe it was the concussion in 2010.
Yeah, Rodgers had the concussion in Detroit the week before, and that was Matt Flynn on Sunday Night Football, as a matter of fact, against Tom Brady.
It's a great storyline to watch. No doubt.
Quickly though, Wes, here at Homer, here in the stands, we all know that Green Bay fans give it their all, and that takes a lot of energy. So grab a warm bowl of Campbell's Chunky Soup. Its meaty goodness fuels the greatness of Packers fans everywhere. Try the delicious classic chicken noodle soup. Just visit your local supermarket and ask for Campbell's Chunky Soup, official soup partner of the Green Bay Packers. Okay, you mentioned the chess match. To me, when you talk about the matchups in this game, what really intrigues me in terms of what Mike Pettin is going to do. And I honestly don't know what his decision is going to be. But we saw last week in Los Angeles that with the Packers having their full complement of cornerbacks healthy, they can cover pretty well on the back end against a pretty explosive offense. But here's the thing. To me, the difficult matchups with the New England Patriots, and I'm taking nothing away from Chris Hogan, Julian Edelman, top quality wide receivers, but it's James White and Rob Gronkowski that become the really intriguing matchups here, because you can't just take a cover guy, a cover corner, at least not for the bulk of the game, and put a corner on those types of guys, because then not only are there some certain matchup problems just within that itself, but then you're way too vulnerable to the run, because you're just too light up front to be able to stop the run if you flood the market with cornerbacks, so to speak. So how Mike Pettin decides to defend Rob Gronkowski and James White, I think, is the crux of this whole chess match.
I agree with you 100%, specifically to White, because, Gronkowski's had to work through some injuries. He's been quiet in certain stretches, but White has been really the constant for them since the first month of the season.
Yeah.
And I know, like I mentioned early on, with Belichick, they want to have options. He loves to play matchup football. We've seen how they've used those running backs in the past. He doesn't want the opposing defensive coordinator to know who the weapons are going to be outside of maybe Corey Dillon, 10, 12 years ago when they had him and he was a 1,600-yard rusher. Otherwise, it's very largely based on whoever the hot hand is and who they feel is going to be the best matchup. That being said, White is sort of evergreen in terms of how you can use him, especially now in the NFL. So I actually think it's been somewhat a positive for them that, you don't want to lose Jeremy Hill for the year. You don't want to be in a situation where guys are going down. But it has allowed White to get more consistent playing time, to have him become more part of the offense. The guy's the leading receiver, Michael. He's 55 catches. Gronk is next with 29. He is the guy that helps move the chains for them consistently. And when you look at Tom Brady, you mentioned the offensive line, and a huge credit to them and the way they've adjusted over the last few years to developing a new front for him. It ultimately is on Tom Brady to get the ball out quickly when he's 41 years old to keep himself upright.
Right.
And James White is often the safety valve towards accomplishing that. And also dynamic once he gets the ball in his hands.
Yeah. And from the Packers side, I want to bring up that 2014 game again, because that one at Lambeau Field, we saw Mike McCarthy get very creative in that game with Randall Cobb and the way that he was used. That game was a coming out party of sorts for a rookie receiver named Davante Adams.
Yeah. What happened?
So,
okay.
Yeah. So I'm really curious offensively what the Packers are going to do here, because we've seen, there is a rookie receiver, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who's really starting to come on here for the Packers. Does Mike McCarthy look for a matchup with MVS against somebody in that New England secondary like he did with Davante Adams in 2014 to try to take advantage of, to highlight, so to speak. So a lot of different things going on here. Obviously, the Packers, Davante Adams is going to be in that Jordy Nelson role, but they don't have Darrelle Revis on the other side. Nelson obviously made a huge play against Darrelle Revis right at the end of the first half there. So Adams is still going to have to do his thing, but it's the chess match. It's finding those matchups. It's scheming things to get certain guys one-on-one against certain guys, and that's what both of these coaches are really, really good at.
And if you're going to beat the New England Patriots, you need secondary players to emerge. Davante Adams was that guy in that 2014 matchup. I believe that was his first career 100-yard game.
It was
6 catches for 121 yards. Belichick, when he was talking to the media, or the Green Bay media on the conference call, said simply, yeah, he killed us. And it was because they locked in on Jordy Nelson, and that allowed Randall Cobb to have some opportunities, to have Davante Adams have a breakthrough game. The Packers are going to need that again in this matchup, because now Davante Adams is the Jordy Nelson threat in this offense. You're going to need your Marquez Valdez-Scantlings to step up. You're going to need to be able to be creative with Randall Cobb, with Jimmy Graham. Packers, with getting healthier on the offensive side of the ball, have their weapons wide open now.
Yep.
And that's where Mike McCarthy can really get to work and making sure that they maximize those and keeping the defense on its heels.
Yeah. All right. Well, you and I have some press conferences to get to, so I think we're going to sign off. And I promise, folks, we will.
I just finished lunch. That's all food. Please turn on. Hey, girl, wow, look at that.
It's in my favorite. Keep up here.
Go back to class.
How's my little Cinderella?
Good.
Hey, wait for something like this. I could do it like this. Wait, Cinderella, right? Yeah. The version of her? Yeah. Want some snacks?
Yeah,
You do.
trick or treat. Trick or treat.
Have you tried this one? It's good.
Trick or treat.
No, just try it. Just one bite. Here, just one take bite. Just try it. Please. It's good. It's really good, bro. Here, see? You like it already.
Hey, yo, we're gonna
Abraham.
watch the rest of this, and when this gets over, I'll put on some scary stuff.
You do have the balls.
I'm gonna put your face up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whoa.
No, Abraham.
I want to show you something. I'm gonna show you. Look.
They said it was 30 bucks there?
I need that.
Like that.
All right, I'll put it back on. You guys enjoy this. Tomorrow we'll be back to work.
Sarah Osborne, an old and bedridden woman. Already a marked woman, she was scorned for marrying her indentured servant, John Osborne. She also shared one noticeable trait with accused witch Sarah Good. Neither of them attended church. On March 1st, 1692, the three women were brought before an informal tribunal in the meeting house of Salem Village in order to establish whether there was any evidence.
18. Hey, the white boy still tripping? Hey, the white boy still tripping? No, I was like, I guess he got scared or something. But he was learning more though. But I guess I got, almost good. I was listening for his bushes. I put my hoodie on and put my headphones in, right? Like, say shit off. Oh, whatever. Turn it off. Still talking, you smack. You wasn't even paying attention, right? I'm like, yes. We talk smash in front of the boys and shit. There's one you will say shit, right?
The magistrate
and I was just looking at my headphones
also
well, and so I want to find thing is
The pre-trial examination determined
I used to do that. I can't
serious weightiness and
the